A 40-year-old goalkeeper from Cape Verde walked into the World Cup, stared down Spain, and for 90 minutes turned one of football's biggest superpowers into a frustrated, confused, desperate mess. Not Real Madrid. Not Barcelona. Not a teenage prodigy with a €100 million price tag. A veteran called Vozinha. A man most of the world had never heard of until the night he made the entire football universe stop and ask one question. Who on earth is this guy? Because this was not supposed to happen. Spain had the stars. Spain had the pressure. Spain had the spotlight. And Cape Verde? Cape Verde had a debut. A dream. And a goalkeeper who looked like he had arrived from another era and somehow belonged in the biggest moment of all. Every shot that came at him felt like the ending of the story. Every save felt like a rewrite. And the craziest part is the clean sheet was only the beginning. Because the real story of Vozinha is even more unbelievable than the performance itself. This is a man who did not become a professional footballer at 16. He did not explode onto the scene at 18. He did not come through one of Europe's giant academies with scouts fighting over him. He did not have the perfect route. He did not have the perfect passport. He did not even have the perfect timing. By the standards of modern football, he was late. Painfully late. The kind of late that usually ends dreams before they start. And that is exactly why this story hits so hard. Because while football was busy celebrating wonder kids, Vozinha was becoming the complete opposite of the modern superstar. He was not the chosen one. He was the ignored one. He was not the future everybody predicted. He was the man nobody expected to matter. And yet somehow, on the biggest stage in world football, against a team packed with players worth more than entire leagues, he became the one name nobody could stop talking about. But to understand why that night felt so powerful, you have to go back to the beginning. And the beginning doesn't look like the start of a football legend at all. It starts on the island of São Vicente in Mindelo, where Josimar José Évora Dias grew up far from the glamour, far from the cameras, far from the machine that manufactures football stars. He was raised by his grandparents while his parents worked. And that small detail became the first mark the world would ever leave on him. The children around him teased him for always going back to his grandparents. They gave him a nickname. Vozinha. Little grandmother. Sounded like a joke. The kind of nickname that follows you around when you're young, the kind you try to outgrow. He never outgrew it. In fact, he carried it all the way to the World Cup. Think about that for a second. The name on the back of the jersey in one of the biggest shocks of the tournament was not some fearsome, branded, perfectly engineered sports identity. It was a childhood nickname tied to family, vulnerability, and the people who raised him. That alone tells you everything about this story. Vozinha was never built in a football factory. He was built in real life. And real life was not easy on him. He was competitive from a young age. He hated losing. He played with older kids. He fought for everything. But this was not the kind of environment where a scout arrives and changes your future. This was not one of those stories where a boy is spotted on a dusty pitch and suddenly signed by a giant. No. The dream moved slowly. Almost cruelly slowly. So slowly that most people would have assumed it was over before it truly began. That's the part nobody tells you about being overlooked. It doesn't always break you in one dramatic moment. Sometimes it wears you down year after year. It makes you wonder if the world is moving on without you. It makes you feel like talent alone is not enough. And for Vozinha, the biggest villain in his career was not one bad coach or one bad mistake. It was invisibility. It was the feeling that he was simply too far away, too unknown, too late. And football can be ruthless to late bloomers. The game loves youth. It sells youth. It worships potential. Clubs want the next Mbappe before he becomes Mbappe. They want the next Bellingham before the rest of the world catches up. If you are not breaking through early, the system starts closing its doors. That is why Vozinha's journey feels almost rebellious. He turned professional at 25. 25. At an age when elite football usually expects you to already be established, he was only just getting started. Most football stories are about arriving early. His was about surviving long enough to arrive at all. And once he finally stepped into professional football, the road did not suddenly become glamorous. It became nomadic. Angola, Moldova, Portugal, Cyprus, Slovakia. Then back to Portugal. Different leagues, different languages, different expectations, new dressing rooms, new battles, new reasons to feel temporary. He was not climbing a golden staircase. He was carrying his dream from country to country, trying to prove in each place that he belonged in the next one. That kind of career does something to a player. It hardens you. It humbles you. It teaches you how to live without guarantees. One season you are adapting to a new team. Next season you are adapting to a new culture. Then you are fighting for minutes. Then you are fighting for respect. Then you are fighting against time itself. And time is brutal in football. It does not care about your backstory. It does not care how much you sacrificed. It only keeps moving. That is what makes Vozinha's rise feel impossible. He wasn't just fighting opponents. He was fighting the clock. And yet, somehow the older he got, the more his story started to gather weight. He became a goalkeeper with miles in his legs and scars in his memory. He made his international debut for Cape Verde in 2012. He kept showing up, kept traveling, kept enduring, kept representing a nation that rarely gets invited into football's grandest conversations. This is important because the villain was not just time. It was geography. It was scale. It was being from a country so small that many casual fans could barely place it on a map, let alone imagine it standing eye to eye with Spain at a World Cup. Cape Verde has a population of roughly 500,000 people. 500,000. Some football clubs have more social media followers than Cape Verde has citizens. Some stadiums hold more people than entire stretches of the islands. And yet here was Cape Verde on the world stage, and here was Vozinha in goal, carrying not just a team, but a nation's sense of possibility. And then came the draw. Spain. Tournament favorites. Bigger names. Bigger expectations. Bigger everything. For most people the script was obvious. Spain would dominate. Spain would break them down. Spain would eventually score. Cape Verde would fight bravely and lose with dignity. That was the expected story. That was the sensible story. That was the story football usually gives to nations like Cape Verde. But then something happened. Vozinha refused to follow the script. The pressure started building early. Spain moved the ball. Spain probed. Spain kept coming. Every wave looked dangerous. Every attack felt like a warning. And when you're facing a team like that, the worst thing you can do is blink. One loose touch. One slow reaction. One wrong step. That's all it takes. But he didn't blink. He stood there like a man who had waited his whole life for the world to finally test him. And the world did test him. Shot after shot. Cross after cross. Tension rising. The kind of pressure that bends teams until they crack. But Vozinha kept answering. A save here. A touch there. A moment of calm when chaos was starting to spread. Then another stop. Then another. And suddenly the game changed shape. Spain was no longer just attacking. Spain was doubting. And doubt is a dangerous thing in football. Once a giant starts asking questions, the underdog starts believing it can become the answer. That's when the match stopped feeling like a mismatch and started feeling like a movie. Because the longer it stayed 0-0, the stranger it became. The crowd could feel it. Spain could feel it. Cape Verde could definitely feel it. The impossible was beginning to breathe. And with every minute, Vozinha looked less like a veteran hanging on and more like the main character of the night. This was not a man surviving the moment. This was a man owning it. Let me put that into context. Modern football tells us greatness belongs to the fastest, the youngest, the most expensive, the most marketable. It tells us the spotlight is reserved for those already standing inside it. Vozinha shattered that in real time. For one night, he became the opposite of everything the modern game sells. He was 40. He was a late bloomer. He came from a tiny nation making its World Cup debut. He played his club football in Portugal's second tier. And still, when the pressure peaked, he looked like the most important player on the pitch. That should not be possible. And that is exactly why people could not look away. Then came the saves that changed everything. The ones inside the box. The quick reactions. The kind of stops goalkeepers do not make with hype. They make them with instinct, nerve, and years of pain stored in their hands. Every save was more than technique. It felt like accumulated resistance. Like every ignored year of his career had shown up at once to say, not today. Not today. Not to Spain. Not at the World Cup. Not in this debut. Not in front of the whole planet. That emotional hammer kept hitting. He was never supposed to be here. He was never supposed to shine here. He was never supposed to outlast the system, outweight the doubters, and then do this. But he did. And when the final whistle came, Cape Verde had a point. A clean sheet. A historic result. Spain had been held. The underdog had not just survived. It had announced itself. And at the center of it all was a goalkeeper named Vozinha, who had spent most of his career living outside football's headlines only to own one of the loudest headlines of the tournament. But the most powerful moment came after the football. He cried. Not the polished tears you see in commercials. Real tears. Heavy tears. The kind that come from years, not minutes. The kind that tell you the result meant more than the table, more than the rating, more than the applause. It meant memory. It meant absence. It meant family. And when he explained why, the whole story landed even harder. He said he cried because he grew up with his grandparents and they were no longer here to see it. The people who gave him the nickname that followed him across his whole life had already passed away. His mother could not be there either because of visa and money issues. So imagine that scene. Imagine reaching the highest stage of your career, producing the performance of your life, and knowing the people who carried you through childhood are not in the stands to watch it. That changes the whole meaning of the night. Now it is not just a football miracle. Now it is a love letter. Now it is grief and gratitude colliding under stadium lights. Now every save looks different. Because he was not just protecting a goal. In some emotional way he was protecting a promise. A promise to the people who raised him. A promise to the younger version of himself who had no reason to believe life would lead here. And this is where the story becomes bigger than sport. Because viewers did not just fall in love with a goalkeeper. They fell in love with what he represented. A world obsessed with perfect trajectories watched a man succeed through the imperfect one. A sport obsessed with youthful arrival watched a player bloom late and bloom loudly. A tournament built on global stars suddenly gave one of its most unforgettable scenes to a player from the margins. That is why his name exploded across social media. That is why millions suddenly wanted to know more. That is why his story traveled so fast. Not because people love stats. Not because people needed a new goalkeeper debate. But because deep down, everyone recognizes the emotional truth in a story like this. Sometimes the most powerful victory is being seen at last. And here's where it gets even better. Vozinha's performance did not feel fluky. It felt earned. It felt like the football gods had been storing this moment for years, waiting for exactly the right stage to release it. The long journey through smaller leagues. The delayed professional start. The constant movement. The hidden resilience. All of it made sense in that one match. All of it became visible. It is almost like football decided to remind us of something we keep forgetting. Not every hero arrives on time. Some heroes arrive after the world has already stopped looking. That is why the Buffon comparison feels so natural, even without the same career path, the same trophies, or the same mythology. Not because Vozinha is literally Buffon, but because there are certain nights when a goalkeeper stops being just a position and becomes a force of will. Buffon gave us those nights. Casillas gave us those nights. Sometimes Manuel Neuer gave us those nights. And against Spain, Vozinha gave Cape Verde one of those nights. The kind people remember years later with a smile and a shake of the head, like they still cannot believe what they saw. And football needs stories like that. It needs reminders that greatness can appear from unexpected places. That the sport is still alive enough to produce a moment nobody's algorithm predicted. That a 40-year-old from Cape Verde can hijack the biggest tournament in the world and make millions care deeply about a life they knew nothing about 24 hours earlier. Now think about what this means for legacy. Before that night, Vozinha was a respected veteran with a long road behind him. After that night he became something else entirely. A symbol. A national hero. The face of belief for a country making history. The goalkeeper who gave Cape Verde its first World Cup point. The late bloomer who embarrassed every assumption about age, scale, and status. That kind of transformation does not happen often. And when it does, it sticks. Because once the world sees you do the impossible, it can never fully unsee it. And maybe that is the most beautiful part of all. He did not need 100 elite seasons to become unforgettable. He needed one stage, one opponent, one night, and the courage to meet it fully. Some players build legacies through constant dominance. Others build them through one immortal chapter. Vozinha may have just written one of those chapters. But maybe the story is not finished yet. Because now the question changes. It is no longer who is Vozinha. Now the question is, what happens next? Can he turn one historic performance into a tournament run nobody saw coming? Can Cape Verde ride this wave of belief deeper into the World Cup? Can a goalkeeper once overlooked by the system become the heartbeat of one of the competition's greatest underdog stories? And on a personal level, the question gets even bigger. What do you do after proving the world wrong in front of millions? Do you fade back into the background? Or do you become one of those rare football figures whose name means more than a career summary ever could? A name that stands for perseverance. For loyalty. For late arrival. For refusing to let timing decide your value. Because that is really what Vozinha has given us. Not just a result. Not just a performance. A challenge. A challenge to every lazy assumption football makes about who gets to matter. He has reminded us that some of the sport's most unforgettable heroes do not come packaged as prodigies. They come with wrinkles, miles, grief, and a nickname from childhood stitched across their back. And somehow that makes the story hit even harder. He was too late, they would say. Too unknown. Too small a country. Too old for this level. Too far from the center of football. But none of that mattered when Spain came calling. Because when the moment finally arrived, the man who had spent a lifetime being underestimated did the one thing underdogs dream about most. He made the world watch. So now I'll leave you with the question this tournament has already thrown into football history. Was that one magical night from a 40-year-old goalkeeper the end of an unbelievable journey? Or the start of an even bigger legend for Cape Verde and the man they call Vozinha?